Hi, everybody. So I wanted to talk about the 3 discoveries that were made during my study, because it's just going to give you so much hope, and you'll be able to identify exactly what stage you're in of your betrayal experience. It's really going to put the whole thing into perspective. So, okay. So the first was that I had a feeling that healing from betrayal was very different than healing from other types of life crises like death of a loved one, disease. I had been through all of them and it felt different for me, but I didn't want to assume it. So I brought it back out to my study participants and I asked them, do you feel that healing from betrayal is different than healing from other things that you may have gone through? And it was unanimous. Every single participant in my study said that it was so different. And, it was different because, yes, with healing from, let's say, a natural disaster or the death of someone you loved, there's a grieving process, there's loss. But what happens with betrayal is you have to rebuild aspects of yourself that were hard hit because of the betrayal. Think about it. Something like trust. That's not an easy thing to rebuild. It could take 30 years to build and a moment to come down. That has to be rebuilt. You have to rebuild self-esteem. Like let's say it was a case of infidelity and your partner chose someone else, and now you're left with the feeling of, was I not good enough? Was I not this enough or that enough? And you're faced with issues of confidence and worthiness and so there's that aspect of it, rejection, abandonment. So all of these things have to be healed, all of these aspects of the self. And, I was originally studying something called post-traumatic growth, which is the sort of the upside of trauma, where your trauma leaves you with a new perspective, a new awareness that you didn't have before this happened. And post-traumatic growth is wonderful. That's the upside of it, where you're seeing the benefit of it. Of course, not like that you wished it happened, but what you've gained because of it. Maybe even an appreciation for the little things, like getting a disease gave you an appreciation that life is short and I better have more fun. Or maybe losing that job was traumatic, but because of it, you created that business that now you love doing. Or that really painful divorce, now because of that, you met your soulmate. So it's things like that. But because healing from betrayal is so different, also because it's just so intentional, it needed that new name. So the new name is Post Betrayal Transformation, PBT. You'll be hearing me talk about that throughout episodes of the podcast. So know that's where that's coming from. The second discovery was there's a collection of symptoms, physically, mentally, and emotionally, so common to betrayal that it's become known as post-betrayal syndrome. And you'll hear me talk about that. I have a quiz for that at pbtinstitute.com/quiz. So at any point, just feel free to take that quiz. It's going to show you to what extent you're still struggling, and it'll also make you realize that, hey, those gut issues or that insomnia or that fear or that anxiety is tied to whatever it is tied to that betrayal. So instead of playing this one big game of whack-a-mole where you're just doing whatever you can to tamp down the symptoms, you could get to the root of it, which is heal the betrayal at the root. And the third thing was, I remember going into this saying, my gosh, how there are the 5 stages of grief. Wouldn't that be something if we could learn, or if something could come out of this, like the 5 stages of betrayal? That would be, because this way, if you're in a phase, it's sort of like, hang on, sister, this next one's coming. And I remember going into it with that thought, and I'll never, ever forget the chairwoman of my dissertation committee, when I showed her everything, all my data, all my research and everything. She said, Debi, there's a process here. There are stages here. And I got such chills. Like, have you ever had that experience where all of a sudden, it's like time stops and you're freaking out because something really cool just happened? And that's what happened. And I realized that every single woman went through the same thing. Her timeline was different. Maybe the tools and methods and everything was different, but it followed the same process. So that's what was identified, that you can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime. But if you're going to heal, you're going to go through these 5 predictable stages. And what's so great about that is now we know what happens physically, mentally, emotionally at every stage and what it takes to move from one stage to the next. So I want to dive right into these because you're going to be hearing a lot about this too. And this way you'll also understand and see if you can find exactly the stage that you may still be stuck in, because some of them, I mean, many people get stuck in, for example, which you'll hear, stage 3 for a lifetime. So here we go. The first stage is, it's sort of like a setup stage, and by no means is there any judgment, any blame. I mean, this was me too. This was, imagine 4 legs of a table. Now, if there were 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with every single study participant, including me, was they were leaning real heavily on the physical and the mental legs of that table and really neglecting the emotional and the spiritual. So what that kind of looked like was they were busy, like they had this one big to-do list and their minds were creating the to-do list and their bodies were taking them around to do it. Now, if a table, think about that table. If you were only if the table only had 2 legs, right, it would be really shaky and unstable and it would easily topple over. Well, that's the setup and that's what I saw. And then stage 2 then, so then there's the shock. You get the news, whatever it is, your best friend, your partner, your coworker, your family member, whatever, and you are just blindsided right here. And this is stage 2, the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. So what does this mean? The breakdown of the body. When you're shocked like that, it imprints, the experience imprints on the body and mind. And you ignite the stress response, which slowly creates symptoms, illnesses, conditions, and even disease. And you start, some of the most common symptoms: extreme exhaustion, digestive issues, it's endless. And what every woman said when they explained what it felt like for them, they would explain it as if it was a feeling of being punched in the gut, the wind being knocked out of you, chaos, confusion. I remember a study participant saying, it was the feeling of if you've ever lost a child in a crowd, like that feeling of just, you just don't have your bearings. You can't make sense of it. So the body starts freaking out. Breakdown of the mind. Now your mind is in this stage of overwhelm, confusion, chaos, brain fog. Nothing makes sense here because everything you believed that was real and true now isn't. And you just can't wrap your mind around what just happened. So there's that. And then there's the breakdown of the worldview. And your worldview is your mental model of how you see the world. I can trust this person. This is safe. This person's safe. This experience is okay. I know how to do this, whatever. It's like your whole way of, working the world. And when you've been shocked by your betrayal experience, there's a breakdown of everything you know. Now think about it. If everything you know has just been shattered, right? Because all the rules have just been broken and a new norm, like a new worldview hasn't been constructed yet, this is terrifying. So this is by far the scariest stage because you're just absolutely in shock. You can't believe what happened. You don't know nothing makes sense now. You don't know anything that's going on. So this is terrifying. But think about it. Here's where the bottom drops out from under you. If the bottom were to drop out from under you, you're walking down the street, let's just say, you would do anything you could to grab onto anything you could. So you would survive and you would stay and you would survive the experience. That's stage 3. Stage 3 is all about survival. It's an extremely practical stage. If you can't help me, get out of my way. Where will I live? How will I feed my kids? Who can I speak to? How can I get myself out of this experience? What can I do? Well, it's just extremely practical. This is still a scary stage. The stress response is still ignited. We're still creating symptoms, illnesses, conditions, disease. We're breaking down the body because the body is not used to this amount of overwhelm. It's really scary, but we need to find out how we can survive it. Now, many people, like I said, stay in this stage forever. You can. And so now imagine here you're in survival, the survival stage, breaking down your body over the course of a lifetime. So if you're wondering, man, why am I always so exhausted? Why do I have these symptoms popping up? Why am I gaining weight, especially in my midsection, things like that? very often it's tied to this right here. So once you've figured out, okay, I can survive this. I'm going to work here at this job. I'm going to live here. I'm going to do this. I can feed my kids, whatever it is that you were challenged with, and that you've been able to figure out, okay, I can do it this way. Then you slowly head into this fourth phase, and this is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Now, when you're in this new normal, here's what it's like. You realize my old norm just doesn't exist anymore. It's not an option, and this will be okay. And if you've ever moved from your old house, condo, apartment, office, whatever, into a new space, it's like that. It's like, it's going to be okay. It doesn't feel cozy. It doesn't feel homey. It doesn't have all my stuff in it that makes it mine just yet, but I'm going to make this okay. When you're in this phase right here, in this stage right here, you're starting to turn down the stress response because you're telling your body, you know what? Okay, we're not running from the saber-toothed tiger anymore, where your stress response is so highly engaged, we can calm down a little bit. Now, this doesn't mean you're rebuilding, but at the very least, you're not creating damage anymore. You start, you're thinking about who's a real friend and who isn't. You have no patience if someone is just a taker. You just don't have room for them anymore. You're making this new space, and you're making new rules about who you want in your life and who you don't. You're creating a new normal. It's really a new normal. And when you've created this new normal and it's feeling good and it feels safe and it's starting to feel comfortable, you slowly start moving into this fifth and most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. So in this space, your body starts to heal. You're not creating physical, mental, and emotional wear and tear anymore. So your body has a chance and an opportunity to heal. You also have the bandwidth to take better care of yourself. When you were in that survival mode, you weren't thinking about self-care, self-love. You were just thinking about survival. It would be the equivalent of putting curtains up during a tornado, like it's not the time. But when you're in this fifth stage, you have the bandwidth to take better care of yourself, and to treat yourself with some love and some nurturing, like where maybe you want to eat healthier because you want to take better care of yourself, or maybe you want to move because you want to treat your body a little bit better. So it's not about punishing it. This is about love. This is about self-love right here. There's rebirth. Transformation can only happen when the old you no longer exists, and rebirth is death of the old and birth of the new. And it's what happens every single season. If you live on the East Coast, where you see how there's the leaves are beautiful. They turn into these magnificent colors, and then they fall off the trees. And, some can look at it as depressing because the winter's coming, but everything is doing what it needs to do in order to be rebirthed in the spring. And that's what's going on right here. And there's this rebirth of you because of what you've experienced, what you've learned, what you've gained. And there's a new worldview. So based on who you've become, because of what you've learned, you have a new set of rules. And these rules, what's so great about these rules, so often we have rules based on what other people have told us. I should feel this way. I should think this way. I should do this. And this is based on you, what you want, who you are, what makes sense for you. And remember that table in the very beginning of stage one, where we were only focusing in on the physical and the mental and really neglecting the emotional and the spiritual. Phase at stage 5, we are solidly grounded. We're still really good at the physical and the mental, getting our to-do list done, but we know how important that emotional and spiritual, those legs are too. So those are the 5 stages, and I want you to just take a look now and say, and try to identify what stage are you in. And remember, what this study showed was you can stay stuck in any stage for years, decades, a lifetime, but there are ways to move through. And that's exactly what this podcast is for. That's exactly what we're going to be teaching you with so many amazing experts who are going to share ways to heal physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. So I hope that helped. I hope that gave you perspective on where you are. And for sure, I'm going to help you get to where you're headed, which is a place of post-betrayal transformation. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.